Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Deviki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, chapter 31. The movements of the living entities, text number 6. Krimivikshata sarvang. One second, Anji, I'm getting the tune. Krimivikshata sarvanga. Krimivikshata sarvanga. Saukumaryat pratikshanam. Saukumaryat pratikshanam. Murcham apnot yurukleshas. Murcham apnot yurukleshas. Tatratyakshuddhitai muhu. Tatratyakshuddhitai muhu. Krimivikshata sarvanga. Saukumaryat pratikshanam. Murcham apnot yurukleshas. Tatratyakshuddhitai muhu. Krimivikshata sarvanga. Saukumaryat pratikshanam. Murcham apnot yurukleshas. Tatratyakshuddhitai muhu. Krimivikshata sarvanga. Pratikshanam. Murcham apnoti urukleshas. Anybody? Krimivikshata sarvanga. Pratikshanam. Murcham apnoti urukleshas. Tatratyakshuddhitai muhu. Tatratyakshuddhitai muhu. Saukumaryat pratikshanam. Murcham apnot yurukleshas. Pratishanam. Yurukleshas. Tatratyayeshu ditayermuhu. Nirshata sarvanga Solkomayat pratikshanam Apnokirklesha Achayeshu ditayermuhu. Word for word, krimibihi, by worms, shata, bitten, sarva angaha, all over the body, sol kumaryat, because of tenderness, patikshanam, moment after moment, mucham, unconsciousness, apnoti, he obtains, urukleshaha, whose suffering is great, tatratyai, being there, in the abdomen, shuditai, hungry, muhuhu, again and again. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of Arvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: bitten again and again all over the body by the hungry worms in the abdomen itself, the child suffers terrible agony because of his tenderness. That he thus becomes unconscious moment after moment because of the terrible condition. Please repeat after me. Bitten again and again all over the body by the hungry worms in the abdomen itself, the child suffers terrible agony because of his tenderness. He thus becomes unconscious moment after moment because of the terrible condition. Purport: the miserable condition of material existence is not only felt when we come out of the womb of the mother, but is also present within the womb. Miserable life begins from the moment the living entity begins to contact his material body. Unfortunately, we forget this experience and do not take the miseries of birth very seriously. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, it is specifically mentioned that one should be very alert to understand the specific duties of birth and death. Just as during the formation of this body we have to pass through so many difficulties within the womb of the mother, at the time of death there are also many difficulties. As described in the previous chapter, one has to transmigrate from one body to another, and the transmigration into the bodies of hogs and dogs is bodies of dogs and hogs is especially miserable. But despite such miserable conditions, due to the spell of Maya, we forget everything and become enamored by the present so-called happiness, which is described as actually no more than a counteraction to distress. Translation again. Bitten again and again all over the body by the hungry worms in the abdomen itself, the child suffers terrible agony because of his tenderness. He thus becomes unconscious moment after moment because of the terrible condition. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadhati Swapanantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhan Usudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam bhangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Tirtharanam Padmanam Madhavam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. Hare Krishna. Sorry, this is last minute class. The devotee that was supposed to give class sort of had a bit of a sickness, so couldn't come. And I'm just like we're talking about the living entity suffering within the womb. I have allergies, so it's just been triggered by the garland. So I can tell from realized experience about material miseries. Actually, just before Vyas Puja, actually on Vyas Puja day before we started the whole Vyas Puja, I met Bhavananda Prabhu and he was asking, are you sick or something? I said, no problem, I'm suffering from hay fever. And then when he looked in the temple room, he saw all the flower decorations and everything. He said, oh, from the flowers. I said, yes, Prabhu, all these flowers. And he said, you're so sinful, you can't even be able to appreciate the Mahaprasad flowers that's offered to the Lord. And I thought, that's so true actually. Just see our miserable condition. The miserable condition is such that we think that we'll enjoy, as Prabhupada says, we become enamored by the present so-called happiness. There's two things Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita. There's the Shreyas and there's the Preyas. And that one is the immediate benefit. Does anyone know what the immediate benefit is? Preyas. And the long-term benefit is the Shreyas. So which one should we focus on? The Preyas or the Shreyas? Are you sure? Are you sure we simply should focus on the long-term goal and not the short-term enjoyment? See, this is now the time where we become calculative. We'll do both. We'll do both. And it reminds me of something that Ganesha Prabhu told me a long time ago. He had asked Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj that, yeah, he was asking, when we practice devotional service, while we practice devotional service, what's the harm of, engaging in sense gratification? Because we can do both simultaneously, right? We can do sense gratification and then we can do devotional service side by side. So, say for example, we want something to be done, yeah, it's okay. I can do that and I can do Krishna consciousness at the same time, it should be fine. So what do you think Maharaj's answer was? If we go for the stock standard response that Prabhupada has taught us, what is the standard answer Prabhupada would give? You light fire and pour water. So Prabhupada, he says this in many places, but I found the most strongest one is during a morning walk. Prabhupada's explaining how you take so much effort to light one fire, and then you pour water. And then you expect the fire to light immediately straight after that. And how long it takes to dry the wood and then light it again. But our problem is we become impatient in the middle of the process, again we put more water. And we expect a big fire to come. This is our problem. So that's one of the stock standard answers Prabhupada would give. Anything else Prabhupada would give? Any other idea? Prabhupada often says sense gratification and devotional service go ill together. It is like taking, let's see what's a good example. We've been having Vyas Pujas again and again and again. It's like taking milk and then a sour substance straight after. Everyone loves paneer, but not to the extent of making the paneer in the stomach, right? It becomes a problem. It makes you ill. It doesn't make you act in the proper state of mind. So, when we practice Krishna consciousness, it's one or the other. As they often say, we have a leg on each boat, right? And that's the biggest problem we all seem to face. Once I asked my spiritual master, when he had come to Sydney, I asked him that, I don't seem to experience taste when I practice devotional service. I just seem to be doing it just for the sake of it. And my Guru Maharaj looked at me like, how to explain? He looked at me as very confused look. He said, you are doing devotional service, you have service, and that's the taste. So I don't seem to understand what you're actually looking for. So the problem comes, and then I realized, oh, okay, I haven't really appreciated what I have. I haven't really got full knowledge, or at least to the best of my capacity, of the gift that Prabhupada, my spiritual master, had given. And the point I wanted to make was that this lack of knowledge causes us to make mistakes. And guess what? We are subject to the reactions of such mistakes. So we're not excused from not having knowledge. And that's the most annoying part. Because you expect, right? I didn't know. Why should I suffer? But this is the situation. Material existence is, as Prabhupada says, she's a hard taskmaster. She's testing us to see whether we're ready to go back home, back to Godhead. And if we're not, she'll continually push us through all the 8.4 billion species of life. Again and again. Apunar was Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punar Avartino Arjuna. That we will go up and down through many lifetimes, going through one birth to another, simply enamored, as Prabhupada says, by the present so-called happiness. So coming back to Shreyas and Preyas. And this is an interesting point, because everyone wants to achieve something in the long term, but at the same time they want to be happy. And I remember when we distribute books, you go to different places, you can see the standard of living of different people according to their house, according to their car, according to the way they act. You can actually see how people are based on their circumstances and how they live. Based on the modes of nature, their consciousness is expressed through what they purchase and how they enjoy life. So when you go and meet such people, then you have this understanding that because of the modes of nature, they're acting in such and such way. But why are they acting in such and such way? Right? So while I was thinking this, I was in one affluent suburb just here near Mossman. And we were distributing books door to door. And we were experiencing a bit of resistance. Because this, and the resistance wasn't the people, the resistance was lack of people who were doing door to door. We knocked the door, nobody home. You go next one. Everyone's working. Everyone's working very hard during the day. And you see this big car. But then in the houses that had the cars, very flashy cars, the people there were very old. They were very aged. So then the thought came to mind, what did they actually enjoy? They worked so hard to gain enjoyment, and now they want to enjoy, but the body is completely against them. What is it that they really enjoy? As Prabhupada says, our position is like the scissor-cutting scientist, Prabhupada says, during one walk, two scientists were walking past a river, and one scientist was saying, this particular situation, it was caused by a knife, it was done by a knife. And the other scientist said, no, it was done by scissor. And so they both argued in a gentlemanly way, and then escalated, and they started fighting. It's done by scissor. The other one said, no, it's done by knife. Like this, they were fighting. Suddenly, the knife-cutting scientist threw the scissor-cutting scientist into the river. And he said, it was done by knife. And that fellow was drowning. The scissor-cutting scientist was drowning. But while he was drowning, he put his hand up. And he was showing this one and drowning. So till the last moment, he was not willing to let go. And that's us. Till the last point, we're not willing to let go of sense gratification. Till the last breath. Not willing to let go. Such adamant, as Prabhupada says, such stubborn dogs. Prabhupada often says very heavily. Very, very stubborn we are. And why we are stubborn is because we're enamored by the present so-called happiness. Prabhupada writes in Bhagavad Gita, I believe this is the The verse is not coming to me. It's in the 5th chapter. Prabhupada writes in the purport that actually this so-called enjoyment of the living entity is actually his greatest enemy. This so-called enjoyment of the living entity is his greatest enemy. Why? Because in that section, Prabhupada's talking. This is the one where he says an intelligent person. Sorry, my mind is not working today. An intelligent person doesn't enjoy in happiness, in sense gratification, because he knows there's a beginning and an end. In that purport, Prabhupada explains this. And you can understand how the mind cheats us. That this is the standard of happiness. If you do like this, you'll be happy. That person has it, you'll be happy. But that's not the case. What do they say? The grass is greener on the other side. But once we get there, where we were before seems to be more greener. And this is how Maya seems to cheat us. Now, I was thinking about this verse, what to speak of, and one of the things that came to mind was we can talk about the miserable condition of material existence, and we can also talk about ahimsa. We can talk about non-violence, because we're now talking about a very crucial subject matter. Because how many of us ever understood what happens within the womb? Right? Society teaches us in such a way that we think that it's such a joyful occasion of bringing a soul into the world, bringing a child in to give birth, right? And we don't have this. We have this romantic idea that we'll die, it'll finish, and then someone who takes birth. When they take birth, it's just a wonderful affair. But they seem to forget why the child is crying when the child takes birth. And Srimad Bhagavatam is so wonderful that it's giving us insight into that which we would never be able to understand. We'd never be able to understand. Like take for example, how would you be able to understand the minds of a pure devotee? But Srimad Bhagavatam gives that. It enables us to be able to understand, like for example, the conversation between Vidura and Uddhava. Such high-level conversation, such expression of Krishna, love for Krishna, Krishna Prem. These are two persons who are in the material world for our benefit, to enact the past, to engage in the pastimes with Krishna. If you think you're sitting here right now, somewhere in the world two people are speaking, do you think you'll ever come to understand what's happening there? What to speak of that, what they're going through, what they're experiencing? Srimad Bhagavatam gives that. And not just any ordinary living entity, the greatest of all living entities. And we have the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, Nityo Nityanam, Chetana Chetananam, that one, Eko Bahulam Vidhati Kama, that one Supreme Consciousness of all there of the many, there's that one Supreme. Right? Cheto Nitya Nityanam. Of the many eternals, He is the Supreme Eternal. This one Supreme Personality of Godhead is giving us indication or understanding of what material existence really is. Like we hear often that when Yudhishthira Maharaj was asked by the Yaksha what is the most wonderful thing in the world, and Yudhishthira Maharaj responds that the most wonderful thing is that people see others dying all around them, but they think they can live forever. They think they can live forever. Have you experienced this before? That Devi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya? That sometimes we get some sort of realization that something's wrong with this material world, something's wrong with my existence, there should be something more. But then as soon as that thought comes, how quickly it becomes covered. Right? It's also very similarly known as Smashana Vairagya. Right? Cemetery renunciation. That when someone passes away, all the relatives and family members come and they start talking about the futility of material existence. They'll speak great, great words. But then when tomorrow comes, what happens? Again, back to the same old, trying to exploit material nature for sense gratification. Cemetery renunciation. So this temporary development of vairagya is immediately quashed, it's quelled, it's completely nullified by Maya. She immediately covers the living entity again. And the living entity continues to be excited in the struggle for material existence. right? They seem to be, this is what Prabhupada says, enamored by present so-called happiness. You know what this word enamored means? When you're enamored by someone, you're captivated, right? And another word Prabhupada says is that we are blinded by the, not reflection, what is the word? Glare. We're blinded by the glare of material existence. You know, when you're driving or going down the street, suddenly some reflection of the sun hits your eyes. You don't know what you're doing, where you're going, what's happening. Especially when you drive. When you drive and you have behind you like an SUV or something with such big lights, it's like they're not, it's as if they put their high beam, but actually it's the normal lights. And so when you drive, it's hitting your eyes, you don't know where you're going, what's happening, or when the sun is hitting. That's what it means by the glare of material existence, the glare of Maya. That she doesn't allow you to see what you're doing. You're just simply going manorat, just going, hoping to achieve happiness. Just like the poet Vidyabit says, that we are in the desert of material existence and we're running just for that one drop of happiness, that one drop of enjoyment that's present in this desert of material existence. But Srimad Bhagavatam is so kind that it's teaching us, it is teaching us the futility of material existence. Why we should give up material existence and turn our face to Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj says, Nate vidhu, I've got it written down. I'm safe. Now I have to find it. Na swartagatim hi Vishnu. Durasaya ye bahirarthamanina ande yatande upaniyamana te pishu tantra urudhamni bhatha. So you can see Prahlad Maharaj is explaining very clearly what is the problem. The problem is na swartagatim hi Vishnu. One does not know that one's goal in life is Vishnu, Krishna. And what happens to such a person? That being enamored by the present so-called happiness, being bewildered, Durasaya ye bahiratamanina, he becomes externally conscious, simply what's there to satisfy my senses. And following the others who are also blind to such a goal in life. Anter yatante upaniyamana te pishu tantra urudamni baddha. They become again entangled in material existence. And this is what Kapila Dev is actually explaining here. That again one will fall into material existence. Again one will have to take birth, and again one has to go through the miseries of being in the womb of the mother. But if we don't know about the miseries of the womb of the mother, what impetus is there for us to take to devotional service? Other than Maya's strong kicks. What other impetus do we have? We don't have any other impetus. Therefore Srimad Bhagavatam is so kind enough to be able to give us this understanding. But when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we think, where is the Leela? Where is the pastime? Why only prayers? Why only this talk about cosmic manifestation? What is the use? Where is the Leela? You know, where is the Ras Leela? Like that. Our mind immediately goes to that. And that's not wrong. If you have such a consciousness, that's wonderful. That's glorified. But prematurely trying to get to that platform of complete absorption in the Lord's Leela has its faults, of course. But who's to say that this is not part of the Lord's Leela also? Who's to say that what we're reading now is not the Lord, part of the Lord's Leela? Is not the Lord that's speaking? Right? Same thing in Kurukshetra. Mayavadis, they explain. Prabhupada gets very upset with this, that people will go on straight to the Rasa Leela, but when they talk about Bhagavad Gita, they don't even think about it. This is not part of Krishna's Leela. But it is part of Krishna's Leela. Krishna's there, he's doing an activity, a pastime. And what is his pastime? He's speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So, this is also part of Krishna Leela. Swayam Bhagavan Krishna has appeared as Kapila Dev, and he's instructing us through his mother Devahuti. He has given us himself in the form of a literary incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam so that we'll benefit in the age of Kali. And what are we learning? We're learning that miserable life begins from the moment the living entity begins to contact his material body. But we think that no, Birth is such a wonderful celebratory event. We think it's such a great utsava, great festival, that we're bringing a living entity in the material world. But what we don't realize is how much pain is involved. We don't know how much suffering is involved. But Srimad Bhagavatam is giving that to us, some understanding. And like this we understand through so many different sections, such as Puranjana section, such as the forest of material enjoyment. Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us straight, not roundabout way, straight. It's giving us full understanding of how material nature operates. And it's up to us to accept and apply it in our lives. So one application you can understand here is that this whole idea of abortion. This whole idea of abortion, originally the idea was that the living entity did not exist, was not considered to be alive until it took birth. Therefore no one felt the guilt of destroying the body within the womb. Because it's just a body, it's not alive. And slowly, medical science explains that after a certain amount of months, the living entity has life. But we see here that as soon as the semen and ovum emulsify and mix and becomes a pea shape, what happens? The living entity enters. It's already there within the womb. So you can understand this. In this context, ahimsa is in not going ahead with such horrible abortions, of terminating the existence of the living entity within the womb. Prabhupada went to the extent of explaining that the difficulties we experience in Kali Yuga, specifically of a living entity being terminated before even coming out of the womb, Prabhupada says it's because that living entity had done that before to another living entity. So he or she is going through the karma. So it's a very difficult situation, and it's a very problematic situation because of the karma that's involved. Prabhupada explains here, unfortunately we forget this experience and do not take the miseries of birth very seriously. And in the Bhagavad Gita therefore specifically mentioned that one should be very alert to understand the specific difficulties of birth and death. So I've already explained that. I repeated a lot about how the difficulties within the womb and at death also are both for our benefit. But I was suddenly reminded, when you talk about birth and death, and when you talk about material existence and the suffering, you see many examples in Srimad Bhagavatam of how it is at this particular point in time, specifically death, how Srimad Bhagavatam gives instruction. One example comes of how Yamaraj appears as a small boy in front of Suyagya and his wives. When Suyagya passes away, his wives are there, and how he explains the futility of material existence. This is Hiranyakashipu giving the example. Then you have Chitraketu Maharaj being taught through his son. Then you have a very famous example, I think it's Murari Chaitanya, of how actually what had happened was that he had died and his body was floating down the river. And that's where he met Thakur Suranga. And Thakur Suranga just chanted the Hare Krishna mantra in his ear, and immediately Murari Chaitanya came to life. And he surrendered his life to his spiritual master. When his parents came to find out that he's still alive, they came immediately searching for him and they asked, "You come home. You're alive, we are your parents, you should come home." And what did Murari Chaitanya say? He said, "No." Why? He said that actually I've taken so many births, I've gone through so many deaths, I have accepted so many mothers and fathers, but he is my real father. This body has already died, your son has already died, but my spiritual master has given me birth. So I'm indebted to him. So much so that he was so afraid of death that it's mentioned that Murari Chaitanya would go to the forest and he would slap tigers and he would pick up snakes and tell them to chant Hare Krishna. That was his conviction in the holy name, his conviction in Krishna consciousness. Now, in terms of violence and in terms of miseries in material existence, when we understand that we go through difficulty when we are born, we go through difficulty when we exist in material existence, then we should develop some sort of understanding of compassion. Right? Some sort of compassion is there. That I've gone through difficulties, the other person is also going through difficulties. Right? Some sort of compassion is there. And that compassion must be properly directed. You see, just understanding material existence for what it is not enough. We need to know what to do. Otherwise, we simply become armchair philosophers. And that's very easy to do. Armchair philosophers don't achieve anything in life. Right? They just simply sit and they speculate. But we need to do something with this knowledge. And what do we need to do with this knowledge? Deviyesha gunamai mama maya duratyaya mamevayet padyante mayametam tarantite. We need to take shelter of Krishna. We need to take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. And this is very important. We shouldn't overlook this, because even great yogis, mystics, aruya Krishnena param padam tata patantyado anadita yusvat angraya. That Prabhupada says that those impersonalists that merge into the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, they fall down. Why? Because they have not caught the Lord's lotus feet. They have not surrendered. So one may be spiritually advanced in understanding he's not the body but the soul. But unless one understands oneself as Jivera Surupa Hoy, Nityara Krishna Das, that we are an eternal servant of Krishna, what is the benefit? It again falls into present so-called happiness. Because then such existence in the Brahmajyoti makes one fall down to material existence. And what happens? They take to extended sense gratification. The very same thing they had given up, they come back and accept again. So what is the benefit? What is the benefit? So therefore our Shreyas, our real understanding of happiness explained in Bhagavad Gita, is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's another verse in Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna explains to Krishna, when he sees the battlefield, that Nachasaknomi avastatum brahmativa chame mana nimitani pasyami vipuritani keshava. I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only causes of misfortune, O Krishna, killer of the Keshi demon. And this is one of my favorite verses when I first read Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because there it's mentioned that nimitani viparitani. For the same act we perform, there's an opposite result. How miserable is that? We endeavor so hard to achieve something and the opposite happens. Arjuna is fighting so that he can rule the kingdom with his family members, so that he can take care and properly rule this kingdom according to Dharma. But if he fights, what happens? The very family members he wants to rule and to protect and rule with, he will kill them. So this nimitani viparitani is, I find it's just very fascinating, because in the word Prabhupada says, the words nimitani viparitani are significant. When a man sees only frustration in his expectations, he thinks, why am I here? Everyone is interested in himself and his own welfare. No one is interested in the Supreme Self. Arjuna is showing ignorance of his real self-interest by Krishna's will. One's real self-interest lies in Vishnu or Krishna. The conditioned soul forgets this and therefore suffers material pains. Arjuna thought that his victory in battle will only be a cause of lamentation for him. So he was thinking of himself, his immediate prayas, his so-called happiness. But it's also worthy to note that Arjuna wasn't just some narrow-minded person. He was thinking of the long-term effect also. If we kill all these men, what will happen to all the women? And what will happen to society thereafter? So Arjuna wasn't just thinking of his sense gratification in the present. He was thinking of the extended society as well. But still that did not, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to be able to convince Krishna that he couldn't fight. Because Krishna's, as Prabhupada is explaining here, everyone's interested in himself and his own welfare. No one's interested in the Supreme Self. One's self-interest lies in Vishnu or Krishna. So, we can take another point from this section of Bhagavatam, that we are suffering material pains. And when we suffer these material pains or hear of these material pains, the question should be why? Why should I suffer? Why am I here? Atata Brahman Jignasa. And that's the beginning of self-realization. We begin to inquire into the self. Why am I here? Why am I suffering? And sometimes when we practice devotional service, we allow ourselves to go into sort of a cruise mode. Then we just let everything happen, just go on. Life goes on, Prabhu, How are you going? Yeah, it's going on, Prabhu. It's going on. So therefore, we are always, Krishna puts an obstacle in our course. That obstacle is not punishment, but rather a favor by the Lord. Because that obstacle makes us reevaluate, what am I doing? How should I practice Krishna consciousness? Like my spiritual master was explaining during Janmashtami, he was saying that Queen Kuti explains this, that Krishna appeared, maybe you have appeared to rejuvenate the chanting and hearing process. And so my spiritual master was saying that these festivals, especially Janmashtami, is an opportunity for us to re-evaluate. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he makes it a point that every Ekadasi he re-evaluates where he is in devotional service. Where he is, what goals he's achieved, and what he wants to achieve before the next Ekadasi. So like that, my Guru Maharaj was explaining that Janmashtami is an opportunity for us to not only evaluate, but also, okay, so I've slacked, I've done this, okay, that's fine. Now let's push this aside and let's start fresh. Let me continue on in devotional service. And let me try and rejuvenate my own hearing and chanting. So, devotional service is full of opportunities to practice, to engage in Krishna's service. And these obstacles, so-called obstacles, are just opportunities for us to overcome our mundane, monotonous way of living. An opportunity to increase our devotion for the Lord and keep increasing as we go. So, rather than being stuck with the prayas, I'll come back to the original point. So, should we be only prayas or should it only be shreyas? Or should it be both? Should it both? It should be only prayas? It should be only shreyas? You see, in devotional service it doesn't matter. When you serve Krishna, it's mentioned that just as when you eat, your hunger is satisfied. In the same way, when we perform devotional service, we are naturally satisfied. And I'll end with this one reference to Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the end of the pastime of Mohini Murti. You see, when the pastime began, both the demons and the demigods were aiming for the same thing. They engaged in the same activities, endeavored in the same way. But the result they both achieved were different. The result they achieved were different. Of course, their consciousness was different. So, in that section, Sukadeva Goswami explains closer to the end of the chapter that the Lord is impartial. He's willing to give everyone equal opportunity. But to the level one surrenders to Him, He reciprocates accordingly. So here at the end of that section, there's this very nice verse that Prabhupada quotes. I'll just quickly quote it. Rather than quoting, Prabhupada gives us. This is 8th canto, chapter 9, text 29. I'll read the translation quickly. In human society, there are various activities performed for the protection of one's wealth and life by one's words, one's mind, and one's actions. But they are all performed for one's personal or extended sense gratification with reference to the body. All these activities are baffled because of being separate from devotional service. But when the same activities are performed for the satisfaction of the Lord, the beneficial results are distributed to everyone, just as water poured on the root of a tree is distributed throughout the tree. It's very similar to what Narad Muni explains to King Prachira Barisa. Last couple of lines. That sarvasya tat bhavati mula nisechinam yat. That simply by performing devotional service, we should be confident that we will be happy now and happy in the future. I remember when I came to Krishna consciousness, I remember seeing, I think it was a Rupa Raghunath Prabhu's van, Hare Krishna, afterlife insurance. So we need to understand this very simple point that Janma Vityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Doshan Darshanam. What is the purpose of understanding being alert to the specific miseries of material existence, is so that we can come to the stage of why. Why should I suffer? And come to the stage of Krishna consciousness. So I spoke on many different things, we went on different paths, but I just wanted to emphasize this one simple thing, that despite such miserable conditions, due to the spell of Maya, we forget everything and become enamored by the present so-called happiness, which is described as actually no more than a counteraction to distress. So if you were to take anything away from today's class, it's this one simple point, that what we call as happiness, as enjoyment through the senses, is not really happiness. In fact, it is just actually no more than a counteraction to distress. You bang your head on the wall and you stop and you feel some relief. But then again you go and bang your head on the wall again. So how is that happiness? So therefore, this section we can take with that proper mindset, that due to the spell of Maya we forget everything and become enamored once again. So when we take a step in Krishna consciousness, we should take steps forward. We should never take a step backward. And to take a step forward, we need to do it in the association of devotees. It's not possible otherwise. Because you see, the more and more we practice devotional service, the more and more we realize we're actually dependent on others. We're dependent on guidance. It's not possible to practice devotional service on one's own. Otherwise, again, caught by the spell of Maya. So, rather than doing the same activities for sense gratification, when the same activities are performed for the satisfaction of the Lord, beneficial results are distributed to everyone. Not just oneself, but everyone. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. If there are any comments or questions, yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we forget this experience and do not take the miseries of birth very seriously. Is it actually, in a way, it's a fortunate situation that the human being forgets? Otherwise, the jiva will be distressed, remembering the 9 months of terrible life in mother's womb. Isn't it in a way fortunate? Otherwise, the whole life, if it distressed, may even commit suicide.
Yeah, yesterday during Monica Prabhu's class, one thing came to mind what Prabhupada was saying. And this one really shocked me actually. When I first heard Prabhupada says, when Prabhupada is saying that even if you have a tinge of material desire, Krishna will give you another body. Krishna is so kind. Krishna is so kind. And Prabhupada is saying with so much feeling. It's not just Prabhupada saying Krishna is so kind. He's saying with so much feeling, Krishna is so kind. Can you imagine what it's like if you loved someone and you still love them for so long but they don't turn your way? And they're going in the wrong direction. You know that they're going to suffer, but still you travel with them just to take care of them. So Krishna's Paramatma is doing that. And Krishna is so kind. So to answer your question, I would say Krishna is so kind. Because you see, Krishna doesn't want to force. Love is not forced. Krishna wants it by free will. So yes, the living entity forgetting the pain in the body, within the womb, and what to speak of within the womb. If we take our own lives, we don't really remember this. We've gone through very, very strong difficulties in life, painful situations, but some of them we just don't remember. Right? We just don't remember. Like my whenever I meet my parents, sometimes mothers, sometimes they'll explain why you're not taking your health, blah, 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 and then she'll remind me of something that happened so long ago. I said, that really happened? That really happened? I suffered like that? So sometimes most of the time we just don't remember it. Because we're so stubborn. Stubborn to enjoy material existence. Krishna has to make us forget it so that we can continue. That's why it's mentioned we don't remember anything in our previous lives. Just to further that thought, this is birth. 9 months within the womb is birth, pain of birth. When you speak of death, Partha touched this already. When you die, do you know why you go through so much suffering? Of course, we go through so much suffering in the hellish planets because of karma. But why? And this comes back to the principle. Why is there punishment for wrongdoing? What is the purpose of punishment? Sorry? Reforming, okay. Sorry? Mukti from sins, that's why we go through. That's purification, yeah? But why is punishment enacted? Rectification. Rectification. So if you have a look in this hellish consciousness, Prabhupada says they go through such suffering so that their consciousness is molded in such a way that they can accept the next body. Can you imagine what it's like to be human in a dog's body? You have the same the same understanding that the hands work in this way, the nose works in this way. But then if you're in the body and you have the desires of a human, how frustrating it would be. So therefore, you go through such suffering of material existence that it makes you forget. So that when you accept the body of a dog, body of a hog, whatever body it may be, this spirit, this Paramatma will again remind you how you should act. You had this desire, act in this way, and then you will act in such a way in that body. That's the difficulty of pain. That's the pain of death. But we don't remember any pain we go through hellish planetary system. We have no understanding, no remembrance. So to answer your question, yeah, Krishna is so kind that he makes us forget all of these things. Just so that we can satisfy our paltry desires for material existence. Yeah.
Just leaving aside exalted souls like Prahlad Maharaja and Parikshit Maharaja, an ordinary human who actually gets to say, chant or hear the Lordship's name, for example, during the Harinam Nagar Sankirtana, do they have to undergo, or do they, if based upon their karma, say for example, if they were to perform some sinful activities, do they still have to go to one of the hellish planets to, or because they've actually heard or chanted the Lord's name once, would that not actually exempt from going to the hellish planets, give them an opportunity to take a human form of birth again?
See, once they chant Krishna's name, Krishna takes care of them directly. So whether they go to heaven or hell, Krishna directly takes charge of that. If Krishna wants, they will go. If Krishna doesn't want, they won't. But generally speaking, once someone chants Hare Krishna, engages in some sort of devotional service, it's mentioned that they will not lose that. They'll get human form of life. If Prabhupada says simply by taking prasadam, with the understanding that it's prasadam, one is able to get human form of life. It's also effective in all other aspects of devotional service. So it's according to the degree of consciousness, I would say.
So they don't need to suffer like this in the 9 months in mother's womb, like we.
No, every living entity has to go through this. Every living entity goes through this. Yeah, just 1 second. I had coastal. Is that okay? Anyone want to add anything to that one? Okay. So you're saying that in the Garbhastuti, which is coming up soon, that only the pious remember? Yeah, you go with what it says there. Yeah. Costa Prabhu. Sorry. Kapila Tattva Sankheta Prabhu. Yeah, it's rectification of consciousness mainly. Punishment is mainly rectification of the mistake. Punishment has no use unless one is able to rectify their mistake. So one goes to prison so that they learn not to do the mistake again. That's the main reason for punishment. My point was I was taking it a step further. The forgetfulness that happens that's caused by that pain helps one be able to accept the next body also. Does that make sense? If you're a human and you still remember what it's like to be a human and you get a body of a dog, it's not compatible.
Okay, forgiveness is mercy. I get that point, but still, that punishment that one goes through, at the end of the day, again, you're going to forget it, and the mercy is flowing when you're there.
Actually, that punishment that one goes through is not, it's not that one always forgets it. How do I explain this?
That stays inside as parameters.
I don't know the technicalities behind it, but you can understand it like this. When someone goes through prison, a thief goes through prison and experiences the pain and comes out, that's still there within the chitta. The impression is still there. So it prevents them from doing it. There's that bar that prevents them from doing it again. But they may not remember the specific details behind it, but they still have that fear. Samskars, prarabdha, you could say like that, yeah. Okay, I'll end here. If there's any other comments, questions, one more. Okay, thank you very much for tolerating and listening. I apologize. Last minute class. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.